Today, we're going to explore the concept of shape and why it matters in various contexts. We'll also look closely at rent seeking behaviors, which often relate to how shape influences economic and social interactions. Understanding these ideas is crucial because they can reveal underlying motivations and consequences in markets and organizations. We'll break down what shape means in this framework and how rent seeking can affect efficiency and fairness. By the end, you'll have a clearer picture of why paying attention to shape and rent seeking is important for making informed decisions. Here, we're looking at the concept of rent seeking. Rent seeking is different from activities that improve products, boost productivity, or increase competition. Instead, it's about the effort spent trying to capture an advantage within existing rules or systems. Essentially, rent seeking involves trying to gain wealth by manipulating or shaping the rules, markets, or access in your favor. This means focusing on capturing value rather than creating new value. Understanding this distinction is crucial because it helps us see how some actions might hinder innovation and fair competition. Here, we're looking at the difference between productive work and rent seeking and why it matters economically. Productive work is all about creating real value. It helps build better goods and expands opportunities for everyone involved. This is the effort that drives growth and innovation. On the other hand, rent seeking is quite different. Instead of generating new value, it focuses on protecting special access or privileges. This shifts wealth around without actually creating anything new. Essentially, it drains time and talent because the same energy can be used productively, but instead, it's diverted into efforts that don't grow the economy. The economic cost of unproductive effort is significant because it wastes resources that could have been better spent on creating real benefits. So, understanding where effort goes and how it translates into value is crucial for making better decisions in business and policy. Let's talk about lobbying and political influence and how they intersect with business practices. Lobbying at its core is about trying to shape policy decisions. Now, this influence can have real value because it can affect market conditions. However, things take a turn when lobbying crosses into rent seeking. This happens when companies use political connections not to create new value or innovate, but to secure special treatment, like tax breaks or subsidies, or regulations that shield them from competition. Essentially, they're using their influence to change the rules to benefit themselves rather than improving the overall market or product. When this happens, policy power morphs into market power, giving these firms an unfair advantage that can stifle competition and harm consumers. So, the key takeaway is that while influence can be valuable, it needs to be wielded responsibly to avoid distorting markets. Here, we're looking at how dominant firms maintain their monopoly power by creating barriers to entry. Instead of focusing on improving their products or services to win customers, these firms often use tactics like licensing rules, exclusive contracts, and even legal challenges to make it harder for new competitors to enter the market. They might also leverage political influence to shape regulations in their favor. The key idea is that by raising the cost and difficulty of entering the market, they protect their dominant position and keep rivals out, rather than competing through innovation or better customer service. This strategy effectively maintains their monopoly by limiting competition. Here, we're looking at the concept of patent and intellectual property abuse. One common tactic is filing patents not to innovate, but simply to block competitors from entering the market. This can seriously stifle progress by preventing others from building on existing ideas. Another issue is the extension of copyrights indefinitely, which keeps works under protection forever and limits new creations or improvements. Sometimes, companies defend trivial intellectual property claims that don't really justify legal action, just to intimidate or burden competitors. All these practices collectively block innovation rather than encourage it. We can see examples of this in various industries where patent trolls or overly aggressive IP enforcement slow down technological advances and creativity. Understanding these abuses is important to recognize how they can harm the overall ecosystem of innovation. Here, we're looking at how cost pressure in healthcare often comes from barriers that exist earlier in the process, but end up causing higher bills for patients down the line. One key point is that patients frequently pay more, not necessarily because the quality of care is improved, but because the system tends to favor protecting existing companies rather than encouraging competition. This can show up in several ways. For instance, drug patent extensions can delay the introduction of cheaper generic medications, keeping costs high for years. Regulatory capture is another issue, where rules intended to protect patients end up shielding established firms instead. Finally, this restricted competition leads to artificial price inflation, meaning prices rise far above the actual cost of providing care. All these factors combine to drive healthcare costs up, impacting patients directly. Here, we're looking at the concept of regulatory capture, which is when the agencies that are supposed to regulate industries start to prioritize the interests of the firms they regulate instead of protecting the public. Essentially, the watchdogs end up becoming allies of the industry. This weakens oversight and can lead to rules and enforcement that favor businesses rather than consumers or the public good. It's important to understand who shapes the rules because if the regulators side with industry, it undermines trust and the effectiveness of regulations. This slide highlights how critical it is to maintain strong, independent regulation to avoid regulatory capture. Here, we're looking at a crucial distinction between profit and rent in the business world. Profit is earned by creating value. This happens when companies innovate, improve their products, lower costs, or offer useful services. It comes from actual performance and competition, benefiting not only the firms but also consumers, who get more choices, better quality, and greater access. On the other hand, rent is about securing an advantage by limiting competition rather than improving what's offered. It often involves using influence, rules, or favoritism to block others from entering the market. Rent extracts existing value rather than creating new value, and this usually harms a market by leading to higher prices, fewer choices, and weaker incentives for innovation. So, while profit drives progress and benefits the broader economy, rent tends to protect position at the expense of market health and consumer welfare. Understanding this difference is key to recognizing how firms succeed and how markets can be improved. Rent seeking essentially reduces economic growth by redirecting effort away from creating real value. The first major impact is that it diverts talent and resources. Instead of using time, money, and expertise to drive productive investment or innovate, these assets are often spent on lobbying, legal battles, and other gatekeeping activities. Second, rent seeking reduces competition by creating barriers to entry. These barriers protect established players, which weakens the pressure markets normally have to improve. As a result, consumers are left with fewer choices and often higher prices. Finally, rent seeking slows innovation. When companies can make money simply by maintaining their protected status, they have less incentive to improve their products, processes, or overall productivity. In simple terms, more energy is put into holding on to existing advantages rather than making the economy stronger and more dynamic. This misallocation of effort and resources ultimately stunts growth and limits progress. Now, let's talk about some key solutions and policy responses that can help address these challenges. First, stronger antitrust enforcement is crucial to maintaining healthy competition in the market, preventing monopolies from stifling innovation and consumer choice. Next, patent reform plays an important role in encouraging innovation by ensuring that the system protects inventors while also allowing for fair competition. Transparency in lobbying is another vital lever. By shining sunlight on lobbying activities, we can promote accountability and reduce undue influence on policymaking. Finally, regulatory independence acts as a set of guardrails, ensuring that rules are applied fairly and consistently without political interference. Together, these four levers form a comprehensive approach to fostering a more competitive, innovative, and transparent economic landscape. Here, the key takeaway is that not all profit is productive. It's important to understand that some profits come from creating real value, like innovation or improving people's lives, while others come from merely extracting value, which can harm the broader society. For society to be healthy and sustainable, it needs to recognize this difference and encourage value creation over value extraction. This distinction helps ensure long-term growth and well-being rather than short-term gains at the expense of others.